Let's stay in the Mountain West / future Pac-12. Let's talk about the Fresno State Bulldogs, all right, who have had, in my opinion, now you can say what you will about the ending of Tim DeRuyter's tenure over there at Fresno State, but have kind of done a really good job with their head coaching hires, particularly within, I don't know, last 7 to 8 years, right? Jeff Tedford and Kalen DeBoer are pretty solid, right? And then Tim Skipper, obviously, the interim head coach there. But Fresno State, okay, goes on. By the way, this is a program that's had 10 wins in 5 of the last 12 years. Okay, this is a program that has high expectations, has great geography, recruits at a high level relative to their peers in their conference. They go out and hire Matt Entz. Okay, who was that? The defensive coordinator for USC. Where was he before that? Try winning national championships over for North Dakota State. Okay, and we've seen, over the years, even currently in college football, multiple, and I mean multiple head coaches go from the FCS level or Division II level or whatever up to Division I FBS and have success. All right, you're looking at Chris Kleiman, okay, Jeff Choate, Willie Fritz, Scott Satterfield, technically, because Scott Satterfield, you know, moved up with Appalachian State when they moved to the FBS, right? If you look at that, Deion Sanders, Bob Chesney, I thought had a pretty solid year at James Madison his first year, and others, okay, and others.
Same thing about Kirk Scanetti too. I mean, he moved up with James Madison, but yeah.
So I just think that there is a Rich Rod, by the way, I guess, who I don't know. I guess before that he was pretty tenured at West Virginia and Michigan. He had already had a lot of experience at the FBS level, but the point is that it can work out, okay? And if you're doubting his ability to coach X's and O's, I think you're ridiculous. I think, not only, right, D'Anton Lynn was there, right, to coach, and he helped get that defense to be a lot better, but the linebacker play for USC this year was magnitudes better when Matt Entz was the linebackers coach. They had more than 40, all right, fewer missed tackles this year at, like, not in the linebacker spot, but in general, right? But most of those are linebackers, than they did the season before, right? They didn't even hit 100 missed tackles this year. They were well over 140, right? Just a year ago. We've talked about constantly, right? Mason Cobb underperforming, yada yada, whatever it is. I thought linebacker play wasn't amazing. It was rather exceptional given what the performance was from that group just a year ago. So, yeah, I think Matt Entz, look, we talked about this. We were like, these coaches that we're going to talk about today are good hires. Matt Entz, I think, is a good hire. And you talk about the athletic department as well. Garrett Classy, okay, brand new AD hire. I guess if you're a Fresno State fan, you know this. If you're not, like, he just got hired, like, this past, August or July, right, in 2024. This is his first hire, okay? He has got to get this right. But what I like about Garrett Classy, right, very NIL, very revenue oriented, very game breaking, right? Like, we talk about what he did, at Wisconsin, Alabama, Nebraska, right? He did some really, really good things for some other programs, right? UIC basically brought them into relevancy, right, as an athletic department when he was able to negotiate some sponsorship deals and some naming rights things that basically, like, accelerated the growth of the athletic department, immensely, right, to the point where they're actually pretty solid at basketball, baseball, volleyball. Like, he did wonders for that program. Now, this isn't a program that's necessarily like UIC that needs that kind of help, but at heart, he is a revenue generator. He is innovative, right? Lincoln, they hosted Garth Brooks at the Lincoln Memorial there when he was at Nebraska. He had a huge hand in that. They hadn't hosted someone since, like, the 80s, a concert there, right? And that generated huge revenue for the athletic department that they were able to share there. So this guy is innovative, okay? And I think hiring Matt Entz, a guy that's very smart, he is a winner, okay? And I think because this is his first big hire, okay, I think it's going to be very important to him that they're on the same page. And I think if the head coach and the athletic department are on the same page, I think that bodes really well, particularly with the new conference realignment movement where Fresno State's going to be moving over to the Pac-12. They're going to be competing with, better teams day in and day out. They're going to have, a tougher time recruiting against these guys because it's just much more heated battles. with some more talented teams. I think this is a good hire, and I think it was a good athletic department hire. I think that this athletic program in general is moving in the right direction with these two guys being the face of it right now.
Yeah, without a doubt. And you mentioned, the hire of Matt Entz and what it actually does. There was a lot of people, and we love our Fresno State fans, right? And we love them because they're passionate about college football. They're passionate about their own team, the Red Wave, Bulldog Nation, all that kind of good stuff. And a lot of Fresno State fans, which I was surprised to my surprise, was not happy with this hire. And they love their own Bulldogs, right? And I love that too, right? And a guy, like Tim Skipper, who you maybe thought maybe deserved a shot at this job. And by the way, he had one. This is what I'll say to that is he went 6-7, really 6-6, right, before the bowl game. And obviously, you had tough circumstances in terms of, how you were thrust into that role, but you had a lot of talent on your team, right? And you lost games you should not have lost to, right? To a bad Hawaii team, a bad Air Force team. Those are losses that will sting with you. You also got blown out by UNLV as well, teams you should be competing with. That's not ideal. And by the way, your schedule was not that brutal in conference either. You had a lot of chances to win that, and obviously, maybe you weren't going to beat Boise State and UNLV for the conference, but you should be right there with them. And the reality is they weren't this year. And I think that speaks volumes and the reasons why Garrett Classy was, able to look outside of just, his facility and really open it up. And you have an opportunity to get a guy like Entz. This was a hell of a hire, I thought, right? What he did at North Dakota State was incredible. And obviously it was a lot of, carrying over success from Chris Kleiman, which the Kleiman that he built that program moved on. But he was with Kleiman for a while. He was the defense coordinator there, right? And then he continued to elevate that program, which, by the way, has taken a step back since he has left, right? I do think that kind of speaks volumes. I guess it's just been a year or two, but the reality is,
I think they won the national championship this year, so I
did they? Oh, did they? Yeah, you're. Never mind. I'm mistaken. Anyways,
but those. Yeah.
Yeah, which is crazy. That's so serious. I was thinking that's on me. That's misspoken. But anyways, I do think that's not a knock on him at all.
It's like, he built the program. They came in and won with his players, right? And he had the program buzzing at a high level. It was clear that he had higher aspirations of coaching in the FBS. He went to take a linebacker coaching job at USC. He was not going to last there very long, right? He is just a very solid coach. And also, too, like at Northern Iowa, he was with Chris Kleiman then. How about at Winona State, okay? You know how many playoff wins Winona State has in their history? 1. And you know who was the defensive coordinator for that team? That would be none other than Matt Entz, right? This guy wins, dude. This guy wins. He's won everywhere he's been. Okay. Kind of the same thing with Kalen DeBoer. You took a shot on Kalen DeBoer. Okay. That's another guy who came up from FCS levels to FBS, and look where he is now. Okay. Like you said, I didn't know that you're a little bit more plugged in with some of these fan bases than I am. So hearing that the Fresno State fan base, the Red Wave, are not very excited about this hire, it's pretty baffling to me.
I think it was. I think it was probably a loud. I would guess it would be a loud minority, right, of people and former players. I think that wanted to give Skipper a chance, and I think the reality is, I think they'll find very good things about Entz. Entz at North Dakota State, right? Notable players he coached, right, as a defensive coach, right. These are some of his notable players that was on the offensive side of the ball when he was there. Trey Lance, right, first-round quarterback. Dylan Erdunes, offensive lineman. Christian Watkins for the Green Bay Packers at wide receiver. Another offensive lineman, Cordell Volson, and obviously more recently, Cody Mauch, the offensive lineman there. As back as DC, he did help Kyle Emanuel get drafted, the linebacker there. To me, that speaks volumes. Not only is his defensive player succeeding and having success, wherever he is, but also his emphasis that he puts and allows to have on the offensive side of the ball. Whenever we talk about defensive coordinators getting hired as head coaches, right? Something I love to zero in on is the offensive coordinator position and what kind of aspect and investment that head coach who has defensive background is putting in on the offensive side of the ball. I think this is a very interesting hire here. So he went out for the offensive coordinator and gets a guy named Josh Davis. Now he is familiar with Entz in terms of the fact that he coached at South Dakota and South Dakota State when Entz was at NDSU. More recently, he was the offense coordinator at South Dakota, right? This past season, he had two 1,000-yard rushers, right? They averaged 436 yards per game. They were ninth in the nation in total offense. The quarterback, Aiden Bowman, had almost 3,000 yards through the air. And they also, very interesting, like they ran the ball a lot more than they threw it. 322 passing attempts to 468 rushes, almost 140, 150 more rushing attempts than they did passing attempts. Very, very interesting. And someone I think will pair well with Entz. And the fact that Entz schemed against them, and he talked about this in his a couple of his interviews and why he went out and got Josh Davis and how hard he was to prepare for as a defensive guy at North Dakota State and how much of a compliment that is to the offense coordinator there with Josh Davis. That to me is very, very exciting. And then the defense coordinator job, right? Nick Benedetto, right? He's a guy that comes from NIU who had a ton of success, who, by the way, limited Notre Dame, shut them down. Same Notre Dame team that put up, 20 plus points against Ohio State, 20 plus points against Penn State, Georgia, all these other very, very talented defenses, right? He was a guy that obviously you're familiar with that defense and that team because you played them in that bowl game, right? The Idaho Potato Bowl. And he really excelled. I think what he and Entz can do in that defensive duo is going to be very, very fun. NIU, right, had a very good defensive team this year. A lot of good players as well on that. And he brings over a couple guys from that NIU team, right? The linebacker coach, Adam Bresky, right, also was special teams coordinator. So he has that background with him as well. And then the D-line coach, Jordan Gilly, he's also coming over from NIU. And they had a bunch of all-MAC guys on that D-line, guys that played very well throughout the season. In terms of guys he's retaining, right, familiar faces for our Fresno State fans, you've got the cornerback coach, J.D. Williams. You've got the running back coach, Aaron Pryor. And then you've got the special teams coordinator and Fresno State legend, John Baxter, right? So to me, this staff, I think, rounded out really, really well. I think it's super interesting. He's bringing in the O-line coach from USC with him. Zach Crabtree was the assistant offensive line coach at USC. He's also bringing in Brian Ferentz, a tight end coach. And if you're a college football fan, that name will sound familiar. He is son of Kirk Ferentz, the Iowa head coach, more famous for having an inept offense at Iowa. But I think what he does in the running game and with tight ends, who, by the way, how many tight ends did Iowa and Brian Ferentz and Kirk Ferentz produce for a long, long time there? I think that's a much better spot for him to be in than offensive play caller, the tight end coach there. So it's just super interesting there. Again, not to go back to it, but if you're a Fresno State fan and you're maybe feeling skeptical about it, I think hopefully we've done a good job in being like, yeah, we don't know exactly how it's going to work out, but the reality is like, this is a damn good hire for Fresno State and in a pivotal time when, like you mentioned, with this AD, his first hire, but also with your moving from the Mountain West to the Pac-12 and all things that go into that, plus with the portal, everything changing, at revenue sharing. You want guys that have been there, done that at the head coaching job. We're listening to Garrett Classy. He talked about, what he wanted, in a head coach. He wanted someone who had experience doing the job before. And that put Entz right to the forefront of his, his list, his short list. And Entz obviously wanted the job. And he had to convince Classy that he won the job. And he obviously did a good job of it because here we are for Matt Entz, and leading the Fresno State Bulldogs.
The last four, if you want to count Jeff Tedford as two separate, tenures, the last four head coaching hires for Fresno State have all had at least a 10-win season. Even Tim DeRuyter. Tim DeRuyter led Fresno State to their highest AP poll ranking in this millennium, right? So despite people wanting to poop on Tim DeRuyter, right, as head coach, maybe it didn't end so well. It really didn't end very well. But the reality is the expectations are pretty high for this program, right? So when I'm looking at giving this hire a grade, okay, I've been talking very highly about Matt Entz, right? We talk about, our grading structure is essentially like B is like you're meeting expectations, right? This is a good hire. Like he's going to meet your expectations, okay? A, B plus, A minus, A. Greater than a B is like, all right, they're going to exceed expectations, okay? A C is they're not going to exceed expectations. They're going to not meet those expectations, all right? A D is like, oh boy. I don't think we've ever given out a D as a hiring grade for a coach, but I'm gonna have to stick with a B here. I think he meets expectations. I think he finds a 10-win season here or there. I think that he's going to compete in this Mountain West. I think he's a really good coach. I think he wins a lot. Um, yeah, I give this a B, and that's a good grade, by the way. Oh no, Fresno State hires a coach and wins 10 games in a year every so often, and will win their conference championship every few years. And yeah, that's pretty good. All right. I mean, there maybe have been some coaching hires that are probably better uh, than this one, but man, I think he's going to do pretty good here. I like this hire. I'm going to give it a B.
Yeah, I'm a little bit higher than you are on Ents. I'm actually at an A minus, which is a really,
Ooh.
really high grade. We gave Bronco Mendenhall Utah State an A, right? I think that's pretty standard, pretty valid for us. I think, Ents, the only reason he is a notch below Bronco Mendenhall is because we've seen Mendenhall do that, right? Exactly what we want him to do at different programs, BYU, at Virginia, like what we thought he was on his way to be doing at New Mexico as well. And not that Matt Hetz can't do it. It's just that he's not as a sure thing as I think Bronco Mendenhall is. I still feel obviously very good about him because of the A minus. I do think Fresno State is probably a better job than Utah State, right? In terms of their fan buying, their resources, their geography as well, and honestly, their program tradition too, and what they've done in recent years. You talked about those 4 head coaches and their stints and having 10-win seasons and how impressive that is. And by the way, 10-win seasons in 2025 and beyond in the Power or in the G5 is putting you right into playoff conversations. So I think that is big time if you can get to a spot if you are that. Last thing I will say too here is, you have obviously the worry that this could potentially, I think the term is stepping stone job that some former players have been using, similar to what Kalen DeBoer and some other guys did. But the reality is if he turns into a top 10 head coach in college football, that's a damn good problem to have. Yeah, right. I think this is a really good job. This is the reality of what it is. You're going to have to hit on multiple coaching hires in a row. That's just the reality of what it is. I think you hit on another one here in Matt Entz. And if you do hit on him, good. He's probably going to leave. And unfortunately, I know it doesn't sound great and it sucks to hear. You don't have to like it. It's just the reality of what college football is right now. And honestly, what it's always been. But you know what? Entz is a great guy. I think he's going to do wonders there at Fresno State. Who knows? Maybe he can stay a long, long time and have a lot of success there. Just like some other guys have done in the G5 level. But yeah, I really like this hire, for Fresno State, and I'm excited to see what he does and continuing to build on guys in the portal. Right, he's gotten 13 transfers already. I think he added at least 6 or so. I think maybe even more high school commits. Already in what he's done in this short month and a half that he's been, the head coach of Fresno State. So obviously, big things I think are ahead for Fresno State and Matt Entz as well.